I'm Luke Butler, and today I'm the face of America. I'm Luke Butler. I'm an artist. I draw, I paint, and for the last 8 years, I've taught drawing and painting as well. You know, when I'm in my studio, I'm alone. It's very solitary. I'm about 10 or 18 inches away from the canvas. And the canvases take months, and so I have a lot of time to think about what I think, to think about what the work needs. With teaching, you know, I have all summer to put the course together, and I have a lot of control. And then on day one of the class, I put that into other people's hands, and suddenly it's this intensely shared living experience. And it's just such a great alternative to the solitude of the studio. I was born in San Francisco, and curiously now I live about half a mile from where I was born. So it's like I've made this total circle. And when I was 12, I moved to New York City, and lived in Soho and then in Brooklyn. So I think of myself as having grown up in New York because those were crucial years. I went to art school in New York, starting in high school. Then I went to Cooper Union, and then I lived there for several years afterwards. I've gone back and forth between New York and San Francisco several times as an adult, but finally settled out here after grad school. I think it's so important for artists to hear just the simple words that art is important, that it matters, that you should do this, that you should take care of it. And, you know, I sort of can't almost imagine how important those words are. So I was very lucky to just grow up hearing that, you know, and I think that's something I've wanted to tell people myself a lot. Because, yeah, you know, there's so much doubt that faces an artist, potentially. And so any sort of simple verbal encouragement really matters. My father is not an artist. He owns a restaurant, which is 51 years old. And briefly before that, he was in advertising, which is what his father had done. And my dad has a real graphic sensibility, a real appreciation for pop culture, for messages. And the walls of his home and his restaurant are covered in pictures, posters, just imagery, things that he relates to, things that speak for him. And so as an artist, if I am someone who believes that pop culture is significant, that it functions almost as a common language, you know, that came from somewhere. And just simply when I go to my dad's house or I go to his restaurant, I see these things that have been talking to me my whole life. You know, sometimes something's been with you so long that you almost don't see it. But I think just all my life I've been surrounded by fragments of popular culture and a joy in those things. So I would say for, you know, both my parents had a pretty serious impact on my life as an artist. I paint the end as a figure in a landscape. To me, it's almost a kind of a classic figure of narrative, you know, and even before moving pictures, you know, it's in writing. You know, if you read, you know, when I just read King Lear again recently, there it is at the end. The end. It's just something we've seen so many times. It's just part of our lives. It's part of our narrative experience. But it's a moving image. It's a transition. You know, you're not meant to linger there. And so it's just such a funny place to stop, you know? And so to me, it's just such a true, essential part of storytelling. But you're not meant to just stay there. Because yeah, once you do, the end, it's almost like this feedback loop. It's like some guy on the bus talking to himself, you know? It's just sort of, and the message strays and becomes something other than what it was. You know, and there's this kind of comic doom to the whole thing. And so to me, there's something almost lost or poignant about the end when it's no longer a moving image. And there's a beauty to it as well. And, you know, I love painting landscapes. I mean, I love looking at waves and water and rocks and trying to make them real and alive, you know, and but then ultimately I'm painting, you know, this cultural landscape, and there's this other layer when the text goes over it. And Those paintings are meant to look and feel like real movies, but they're not. They're actually taken from just the world around me here. San Francisco is a very beautiful place, iconic. It has a great cinematic history. And so you can go out to the ocean and just take these, amazing pictures of water hitting rocks, and it looks and feels like something that's already in a film. And so I'm sort of making these things up. I want them to feel genuine, but they're not. So they refer to that world of movies without referring to anything specific. It's the end has a very different identity as a moving versus a still image, and just simply stopping there to me is it's funny and it's significant. Text is not necessarily reading. You're not meant to just sit there and read the image over again. It's a visual element of the painting, and it has to be integrated with the imagery, and so that's why I think I even think about it as a figure in a landscape. So it has to have a strong visual aspect to it, because you don't want to just sit there and read the end over and over again. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's the interaction between the text and what surrounds it that matters. And I think every artist, the artists you just mentioned, all handle it very differently. I mean, someone like Jenny Holzer, it's a lot of text, but we see these lights and we see movement, and the text kind of goes in and out of our consciousness. I think, to me, the beauty of Ed Ruscha is that he almost, we rely on a sense of meaning and an assumption of what words are telling us. And when you look at his work, I feel like the meaning starts to just stray and wander off, and you're looking at almost a shell of something. It's like he's taken the word and just turned it into something else. And I think he's someone that really plays with, just meanings and our assumptions of them. What I'm doing with the end is, I just have an abiding, lifelong love of movies and of heroic narrative fiction. And I watch movies all the time, over and over again. Even at night when I'm painting smaller work at home, I often have a movie playing, so they're literally with me as I'm doing my work. And so for me, I'm very much still in that narrative vein. And the end is a character, it's a figure in the story. And by painting it, it's a way to sort of freeze the story and have it not moving, but still have all of its vitality kind of stored in the image. Well, I've been watching Star Trek and Starsky and Hutch, since before I can remember. They are not, they didn't just stay in my childhood, they came with me. Some things stay in your childhood and you might be perfectly happy to see them again. Other things go with you. And, at every stage of my life, I have been able to look at those figures in that world and just find it fascinating to see more things. And so I think as an artist, you really want to figure out what are the things that matter most to you. What are the things you've always been thinking about? And for me, Starsky and Hutch and Star Trek are two of those things. Even now, I've been watching Starsky and Hutch rather actively again. It's been a few years. And I'm really struck by the lavish beauty of the imagery, that great sort of mid-70s film quality. And I almost feel like I could teach a painting course just based on those episodes. You see an alley with a white building and a red car and a red dumpster, and it makes me think of Matisse. I don't know if everybody would put Matisse and Starsky and Hutch together, but I guess I do. And, so that's what I have to do. I see an essential connection there. So, I love looking at those things. I love thinking about those things. When I was a small child, 4, 5, 6 years old, I would come home from school and watch Star Trek every day. And we had these 2 black chairs in front of the TV that spun around, and so I could really just feel like Captain Kirk. And I loved that world. I loved the space and the adventure, and I was especially intrigued by the independence and the authority of Captain Kirk. He could yell fight, tell people what to do. You know, he was a lover on an intergalactic scale. All the things that I, as a 5-year-old, was not. And so when I would try to model those traits around the house, you know, very quickly my parents had to just sit me down and say, look, it's great that you like that stuff, but you have to understand that that world is not real. That's not how people really act. And I understood that. Even then, I think I could understand that. But, you know, Star Trek has been with me at every phase of my life. And all these years later, I mean, I have this very deep, abiding, significant relationship with that world, with those characters, with the people that made it go. And I share that love with other people, with friends and with friends that I haven't even met yet. And so there's this tension between my parents warning to me that that world is not real, and then the reality, the depth, and the significance of the relationship I've had with it over time. And I think that tension is something that really fuels my work. And so when I'm painting those things, I really want them to look and feel like what they are, or what they were already. But there has to be something else that wasn't originally in the picture. So simply by having it as a still image and not as a moving image, you know, already that is very different. And, you know, I reduce or eliminate a lot of the extraneous narrative background and just sort of freeze these figures. And so a painting of Captain Kirk is also a painting of mortality, vulnerability, anxiety, as he's falling to the ground, kind of being crushed into his own shadow, it seems. And, you know, mortality, vulnerability, anxiety, these are things without faces. Those are things that have to be conjured. And so the painting may appear to be about Starsky and Hutch or Captain Kirk, but it's actually really needs to be about these other things. So it's kind of a conjuring act. I like to talk about painting the visible to conjure the invisible. And, you know, as somebody who is interested in reality, I mean, I'm painting pop culture, but I'm really hoping to talk about things that are real and significant in our world. You know, heroism is just not true all by itself. Nobody ever just stands tall. Nobody ever just wins. You know, life is about standing sometimes, falling sometimes, getting up. Sometimes it's about nothing at all. And so if I'm looking at heroes and trying to see reality, there's something about the falling of the hero that is especially significant. You know, we don't notice the champion when he's standing tall the way that we do when he's brought low. I mean, think about ancient Greek sculptures, you know, the fallen warrior. And so there's just something especially poignant to me about the champion brought low. And so that's something that, you know, once you start looking for it, you can find quite a lot of it, especially in those great old things. And yeah, there's something about, you know, like just Star Trek, they always win at the end, but there's a lot of falling, a lot of dying even along the way. And they're always rushing to each other's side and holding each other. And when you freeze those images, they almost have a religious iconography. They look like Renaissance painting to me. And so, yeah, if you can just freeze the image and take it out of that moving picture context, it really has just a totally different new identity. You know, as much as it is what it was to start with, it's really something new. And what really makes that go, I think, is I just have a deep, constant desire to look at that world and look again. And so in painting it, just all the details that I get to linger over, you know, it's such a joy. And just, I love painting those things.